Hello, litigators. Court is now in session. So there have been a lot of people coming out, talking, getting interviewed, talking about their different experiences with Kohberger. While there are a lot of clout chasers out there, I think looking at these people, assessing their body language as they speak, look at the words that they're saying and see if they are consistent with some of the prior statements they said is imperative. And so two of the individuals there's a couple of individuals that have come out and gave some descriptions about their experiences with Bryan Kohberger. Another disturbing detail that has come out about this is just how Bryan just sort of resumed his life per usual. And he had medical appointments after the killings. I'm really curious to see if maybe during those medical appointments, and I know we won't be able to know this from the doctors because, of course, HIPAA laws, but I wonder if he went to the medical appointments to treat any injuries he sustained, any scratches or whatever, cuts per se, at these doctor's appointments. That would be quite interesting. I wonder how that will come into play. But let's take a look at some of the information that has unfolded. So first things first is this individual, he is a former friend of Bryan Kohberger, and he came and he gave some pretty substantive details about Bryan and his experiences, also how they have previously were drug addicts together allegedly. So let's hear what he has to say.
Welcome back to the program. So we know the suspect was a criminal justice major. We know he was pursuing his PhD. We know that he had for a period of time. Rich, what can you tell me about the suspect? Worked with him for a period of time. Rich, what can you tell me about the suspect? What was he like?
He was just your average guy. I met him through some friends, and they told me that he was a little weird, and he was a little socially awkward, I guess you could say. But he wasn't a bad guy. He needed a job, so I worked at a pizza shop at that time, and they were hiring. I said, yeah, come on in and apply, and he did, and he got the job. So I worked with him for a little bit. But he was quiet, though.
What was conversation like with him?
What was that?
What was conversation like with him? Like when you talk with him at work, would he look you in your eyes? Did he have friends? Did he have a girlfriend at the time?
It was so long ago. It was like 2013, but he didn't have a girlfriend. I do remember that. And my wife went to school with him. They graduated together, and she doesn't remember him ever having a girlfriend, and I don't remember him ever having a girlfriend. And he didn't have many friends, so he would do anything to fit in, and would do he just wanted to be liked by everybody. But he wasn't a bad kid. He was all right. And I knew his sister. I went to school with his sister, and I knew his father worked for the school, and I believe his mother did too. But his family, they were all nice people. And, his dad was always really nice to me, very polite. But I never thought that he would do something like that.
Good copy. So we've heard from some people that surrounded him that there may have been drug use in his life prior as well. Did you know him to use drugs or anything like this, sir?
Yeah, he did use drugs. That's how I really know him too. He was a big heroin addict, and so was I. I got 6 years clean now. I work in treatment and everything, but back then I was using, and so that's how I know for a fact he was using. I've got high with him a couple times and used with him. And I remember one night we went out and his car broke down, and his dad had to come out, and he got pretty angry. Well, because his car broke down and everything, and we couldn't get what we needed that night. And I knew other people that dealt drugs, and we would deliver drugs to him a lot. And so that's when I heard about this case. I haven't heard from him in so long. And then I heard about this, and it said that he was going to college. I said, I haven't heard from him. I guess that's what he's been doing. He must have cleaned up. I know he was in and out of rehab a couple times, but he really did. He cleaned up and was going to college all these years.
Rich, I'm short on time, but I got to ask you one last question.
Well, he gave us a lot of information there so far. We're going to get to that last question he's going to ask. But this man gave us a lot of information. First and foremost, he said that not only he, but his wife both noticed that Bryan never had girlfriends. That, to me, is an indicator of someone who is possibly an incel, can't seem to attract women. And we're going to hear from actually one of his Tinder dates who actually went and did a live interview so we can actually see and hear her face to face and get her identity to confirm what she's saying. But she and other women just confirm his awkwardness and his inability to even communicate effectively with women. But another thing that he mentions is just his social awkwardness, even at work, just saying that he was weird. People thought he was weird. Even when he was introduced to Bryan by his friends, he said that the other people described him as weird. These are all red flags for an individual who is having social issues and interacting with issues. And we can see that confirmed by some of his posts that he put on TAPA that I did a video on. You'll have to watch that video as we go into detail of each post, but how he talks about how he sees humans as just a organic sack of meat. It doesn't seem like it registers to him that humans matter or lives matter. He just sees them as a sack of meat. So that to me shows some qualities of some serious mental health issues. Also, he mentions the constant addict or drug addict kind of vibe from Bryan is that this man here and Bryan would regularly use. He even talks about how there was a specific incident where Bryan tries to drive with him to go get drugs, but the car breaks down and his father's car breaks down. He has to end up going home. That was something similar to what Casey said. There was another woman that came out named Casey, and she said Bryan would make her drive around town to these places, and she later realized that he was actually having her drive him to his drug dealer. So this is consistent because this gentleman is saying that Bryan had car problems, and then Casey, who came and spoke, was basically saying she was giving him rides. So that's consistent. If he's having car trouble, then he would have more than likely requested that a friend give him a ride to these areas to buy drugs. Also, this individual here that was his former friend says that Bryan was in and out of rehab. So we could see a lot of problems with that. There's a lot of people that we've been hearing come out say consistent statements that Bryan was in and out of rehab. One of his friends, Casey, and other individuals have come out and said that. So we could see that a lot of the information that these individuals are giving are consistent with what other people are saying, which is how we can assess the credibility of this individual. But just with the information he's telling us, we can tell that Bryan was a very troubled individual.
Question. We've heard from people that he had a track record of being inappropriate, borderline offensive to women. Did you ever see that in any of your interactions with him and interactions with women?
Not in my time knowing him. I've never seen him ever act like that towards women. I've never seen him come off that way ever towards anybody.
Yeah. Rich, thank you so much for joining the program.
And so you can tell he's being unbiased. He's just being a straight, honest perspective. He's not just giving the positive, but the negative. And here he was saying that he didn't notice any awkward interactions with women, but there's a lot of women that have recently come out and said contrary. For example, a young lady who went on a Tinder date with him, she claims that he was awkward toward her and they had a very awkward experience. This young lady here, she has since changed completely from how she looked before. But this young lady here, and the reason why I feel it's good to present her now is because she's actually coming out physically and showing herself. So that shows, again, some effort to be credible and show her the fact that she's actually going to come out and show her identity, because we can literally look this stuff up. But she said it's about 7 years ago she went on a date with him. And she said he kept just trying to touch her. We're going to hear from her, but there's some details in an article that I want to just specify with you, because actually she went on TikTok and she's been talking a lot on TikTok. And she said, we matched on Tinder. We talked for a couple of hours. And then he was like, hey, you want to go to the movies with me tonight? I was like, sure. So we went to the movies. The date took place about 7 years ago, the woman said. However, her contact with Kohlberger was very brief, lasted no more than 24 hours. The woman said she did not recall the movie they saw, but remembered that she and Kohberger ended up at her college dorm afterwards. So this is the problem here. We're hearing a lot of some disturbing interactions with online dating. And I don't know what's going on with women these days, but they get on these Tinder dates or these online dates, and they talk to the guys for a couple hours or whatever, and they think that makes them safe enough to go on dates. And I just got to alert you women to please stop doing this. But this young lady here, she talks to him for a couple hours, as she said, which is a red flag because she only had talked to him for a couple hours. She didn't know this guy. She didn't even build a relationship or a rapport with this guy. She just talks to him for a couple hours and then goes to the movies with him and then feels comfortable enough to let him go into her dorm, guys. So he goes into her dorm and she says Kohberger invited himself inside. So this right here is showing she didn't invite him inside to her dorm. He intrusively came into her dorm without her even inviting him. That was the first red flag. And you got to be careful because a lot of socially awkward individuals like Bryan go on these dating apps to prey upon vulnerable women. And so the first red flag is here. He invites himself inside and she didn't even invite him. So red flag 1. And she said he wanted to watch another movie on Netflix. He kept trying to touch me, not like inappropriately, just like to tickle and like rub my shoulders and stuff, she said. And I was like, why are you touching me? What are you doing? That prompted Kohberger to get super serious, she said. He was like, I'm not mad. He's like, I'm not mad. I'm like, you are though. And he's like, I'm not touching you. Kind of like trying to gaslight me into thinking that he didn't touch me, which is weird. And that's another red flag. So he basically touched this young lady multiple times, which made her uncomfortable. She confronts him about it. And then he turns around and denies it as if he didn't do it, trying to gaslight her and basically make her feel like she's the crazy one, that she was just seeing things or feeling things. This kind of behavior that he's showing to her is consistent with what other people have said about him. For example, the man who owns the bar in Pennsylvania, who said that Bryan had come to his bar multiple times. He had been so creepy with the girls and his staff that they wrote notes saying that he makes creepy comments and does creepy things. Bryan had made creepy comments to women, asking them, where they lived at, who were they with, and also had called a woman the B word when she rejected him. Well, the owner of the bar ends up confronting Bryan about these inappropriate behaviors, and he tells Bryan, you're not going to act you're going to behave yourself when you're here, right? Or you're not going to act inappropriate with the women. And Bryan denies it as if it didn't happen. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. You got the wrong person. So basically kind of gaslighting that bar owner when there's been multiple issues with him in the past. So it seems we got two different people saying the same statements, which you can utilize to assess that this man has a problem with dishonesty. Seems like he does a little dishonesty and tries to gaslight women, gaslight people in general when he does wrong conduct, which is very disturbing, shows some antisocial tendencies that he has. The woman said she then told Kohberger she was going to the shared bathroom in her dorm and that he followed her there. So when she goes to the shared bathroom in her dorm, he proceeds to follow her, being intrusive, not respecting her boundaries. Again, a lot of socially awkward red flags and indicators that this man had an issue, an inability to really properly engage with women, which is why he had been consistently rejected throughout his life with different women, even all the way in high school when women would throw things at him. She said he didn't go in with me, but like he stood outside the door and like, I don't know. I just thought that he was weird, she said. In an effort to get him to leave, she pretended to throw up, but not because she was afraid of him. It wasn't because I was scared of him or like thought he would hurt me. If I asked him to leave, it was just mostly because I'm socially awkward. Oh, she said, it was mostly because I'm socially awkward. I didn't know how to ask him to leave, the woman said. Okay, so she then said, he then sent her a message on Tinder saying he was leaving. And he said, awesome, my plan worked. Oh, so after she was pretending to throw up in the public dorm room they had a public bathroom for the dorm. they had like an outside bathroom, shared bathroom in the dorm. He follows her there, being intrusive, basically. She pretends to throw up loud so he can leave, and he does leave. And so then he leaves, and she's like, awesome, my plan worked. And then after about an hour later, he then texts her and said that she had good birthing hips, and she never talked to him again. So that's just consistent with him just being very socially awkward. But I wanted you guys to hear it from her herself. I read those because that article gives us a more detailed description of what happened. And in this interview that she does, she just gives us a very brief descriptor of what happened. But it's more effective. I think it's more essential for us to hear directly from her than just reading the article. But I wanted to read the article to you because there's more descriptions of what happened versus what she's going to say here.
This woman couldn't believe her eyes.
I recognized him immediately, and my heart just sank because
I love HoneyBook. It handles every.
couldn't believe that. Like, recognized him immediately, and my heart just sank because I couldn't believe that. Like, I was face to face with this guy.
Nurse Haley Willette says they met on Believe Her Eyes.
I recognized him immediately, and my heart just sank because I couldn't believe that. Like, I was face to face with this guy.
Nurse Haley Willette says they met on Tinder in 2015 when they were both psych majors at Pennsylvania colleges. He took her to a movie, then insisted on escorting her to her dorm room.
See, that's the first thing we could tell that this young lady is possibly credible. She said they were both psych majors, and that is true. Bryan was a psych major, and he got an associate's degree in psychology. So that first part sounds consistent.
I was kind of afraid to say no, so I just let him come in with me.
Then he did something she says she'll never forget.
He kept trying to tickle me, and I would ask him to stop, or I'd say, "What are you doing?" And he would be like, I'm not tickling you. And he would get very serious.
Creeped out by KOHBERGER, she came up with a clever ruse.
I proceeded to pretend to throw up in the bathroom, hoping that, it would gross him out and he would leave.
Did it work?
Yeah. He had messaged me on Tinder and said that he was leaving and that he had a good time and that he would message me later. And then about an hour later, he messaged me and he said that I had good birthing hips. And I just never messaged him back after that.
After what happened to the 4 Idaho students, Haley thinks she had a lucky escape.
It could have been me.
And this woman says she knows and sympathizes with what Dylan Mortensen is going through. Dylan is one of the
And we'll definitely talk about that interview a little later because she actually gave some pretty great insight too about what the roommate could possibly be going through. But as you could hear from her, is that Bryan doesn't tend to respect the boundaries of women. Another thing that we can look at here is to look at the type of physical type of Bryan, because this is how she looked back in 7 years ago. And you can see he likes women with lighter hair, women that kind of had the very pretty girl look. Well, that's consistent with some of the victims that are involved in this tragedy that have the similar physical features as this young lady. So that is a clue that Bryan targeted these victims. I would say in particular, Kaylee, in my opinion, possibly Maddie, but I still think Kaylee. But look, Kaylee kind of similarly favors this young lady here in her years back 7 years ago. So, and mind you, he's been rejected by his type many times, allegedly, based upon the different statements from different people and the bar owner and his friends, that he's been repeatedly rejected by his own type of women. And so I think it fostered this sense of hatred. One way also, this young lady here who talks about how the creepy things that Bryan did, this happened over 7 years ago, and she's able to recall in detail the disturbing experiences all the way up to the last text message. That to me shows a form of credibility, because I've seen this woman come out multiple times, and each time she gives her statement, she's consistent, except for in the article, she gave us a lot more details. That's why I wanted to read the article to you, because when she does this interview on Inside Edition, she doesn't go into the fact that they actually did go to a movie theater and she didn't want to be there at the movie. She didn't even like the movie, and how he followed her to her dorm and invited himself on in without her even inviting him. So she gave us a little bit more details. But just looking at her physical features too, you could see the physical type that Bryan likes, which can clue us in on the motive for why Bryan was attracted to these particular victims, because the targeted victims that I particularly think, guys, might be at least two of them look and favor this young lady here. So that's why I feel like he gained a obsession with these young ladies, because he knew he could not ever get these type of women. And all the years of rejection that he has experienced fostered this sense of hatred in him, which led him to target these poor victims. And he decided and made a choice that they would be his first victims, in my opinion. Now, guys, there are a lot more people that have come out and talked about Bryan and their experiences with him. And I think it's important that we read these, because they really are showing us a pattern of how people engage with this man and how a lot of them felt uncomfortable around him. And I think that really does help us understand the type of person he is, because one thing we have found is that we looked at some of his disturbing posts on Talk and just looked at the disturbing mind of him and how he had talked about how demons literally laughed at him, and he would hear screaming voices in his head, and how he saw humans as just a sack of meat. As you're hearing his mindset from those, you have to watch that Talk video, and then you're hearing how he interacts with other people. We are starting to see that this individual, Bryan here, was a foreseeable time bomb. He was a serial killer in the making, and had he had early intervention, we may not have been here today. We may have been able to prevent this tragedy from escalating. So let's read this article. This Inside article says Bryan Kohberger was eager to make friends, neighbors say, and so chatty one sometimes dodged him. So it's like he talked so much that some people dodged him. Well, this is kind of inconsistent with what some of the students have said in his class, because some of the students in his class have said that Bryan was very quiet. So this is a different perspective that we're hearing about Bryan. Neighbors say Bryan Kohberger was so chatty that one sometimes dodged him. Kohberger is accused of the grisly killings of the Idaho 4. Let's get on. We already know that. Even after the killings, Kohberger kept an appointment and greeted his neighbors warmly. So that was very disturbing. He just kept going to his doctor's appointments. I know that there's a lot of HIPAA laws, but I would hope that the authorities are able to utilize the fact that this is a criminal investigation to see if they can, which they probably can if they can ask the judge or something, to breach that, but to find out if Bryan had any scratches or abrasions or scars on, or whatever, bruises on him from this killing when he went to these doctor's appointments. That is going to be very important. Pullman, Washington. 4 residents who aren't undergrads bouncing between parks and Greek life, living in this college town can feel isolating. So when Aran Dash, a 28-year-old engineering student at Washington State University, got a new downstairs neighbor in his Steptoe Village apartment complex in August, he understood why the stranger was eager to make friends. Dash said Bryan Kohberger, who is now charged with brutally unaliving 4 Idaho students, went out of his way to introduce himself and to try to make plans to hang out. He asked me what was I studying. Where am I from? Said Dash, who moved to Pullman from India for his studies. He would make just friendly small talk. Okay, I don't want to hear all this. What? But interviews with Dash, his roommate, and others who occasionally knew Kohberger paint a different picture. One of a man who wasn't always introverted and could sometimes have an outgoing demeanor that left people feeling impressed or put off. So it's kind of like with Bryan, you either like him or you dislike him. It seems like some people find him impressed because Bryan will put on this fake image of this artificial intelligence, meaning he tries to exaggerate his capabilities to appear like he's intelligent when in reality he's really insecure and doesn't think he's smart. And we know this based upon his alleged statements in the Tappa blog. He talked a lot about feeling insignificant, not feeling smart enough, all the things he's basically was thinking about himself to make him feel like he was nothing and not a valuable person. So based upon his mindset about himself, this person of feeling impressed, some people feeling impressed with him, leads me to believe that he was overcompensating. For example, trying to appear to be extra genius or extra smart when in reality inside he feels very unintelligent. And a lot of people would say they were put off by him too. So it was kind of like a either black or white situation with Bryan. Some people like him, some people don't like him. Popping in and out of the Pullman college shops, dropping by local craft beer establishments, and attempting to hang out with his neighbors. Kohberger didn't stand out as unhinged, but rather as sometimes chatty guy whose lengthy conversations might throw a wrench in his neighbor's days. So see, he would be, this is the type of guy that doesn't respect people's time schedules. That's, again, to me, another indicator of his antisocial personality. He would sit there and talk to people for hours and hours and hours, and people had things to do and he didn't even care. He would totally disregard how they felt, and he would want people to sit and listen to him for hours. That is something consistent with a narcissist, because narcissists do that. They'll tend to talk and talk and talk, and they don't really care what you have to say, but they'll just talk for hours and hours and hours and intrude on your time, your schedule, things going on with you, because personally they could care less about you. All they care about is themselves and getting their point across. Students on campus of the Washington State University, where Kohberger was graduated, they said that Kohberger lived in beneath Dash and his roommate in a boxy unit at Steptoe, a popular development that houses graduate students. Okay, so he was a roommate with this individual. He said it is on a wind-swept hilltop cut with roads and surrounded by similar style buildings near the Washington State University campus. Most residents in the village are foreign exchange students, many with families. In the back of Kohberger's building is a small child's playground. In front is a large backtop parking lot. And one thing to note is that this, where he was living, it was more of a family dorm area for families. And they thought Bryan was going to come with his family, but he never did. He was always alone. He didn't have a family. So I don't know how he got into that dorm, but that's pretty interesting. But Dash's roommate, who asked Insider not to name him out of fear of harassment, said Kohberger gave him his phone number and repeatedly suggested that they socialize. So again, even though Bryan's trying to make friends, people don't want to be friends with him. Big red flag because of his antisocial characteristics of being intrusive, being socially awkward. And a lot of people just found him to be very quite weird. That's what a lot of descriptions they would say. He talked to everybody. He was a very chatty person, not charming, but outgoing, the roommate said. He would ask me to hang out. And this part is very interesting, not charming, but outgoing. That's contrary to some of the descriptions that people have said. People have said he didn't have a lot of friends, that Bryan talks about him being in his Tappa Talk blog. He says that he was always alone. He talked about wandering around at 2 o'clock alone by himself, even back when he was 17. So it seems like Bryan tried to reach out to a lot of people, but people didn't want to hang out with him. That's what it seems like. And that can build in a person a sense of depression and continual rejection. One day, the roommate suggested to Kohberger that they work out together. Okay. He seemed like a very fit person. So I asked him if he wanted to come to the gym with me, come to my gym with me. Kohberger had declined because he had a commitment. Later, Kohberger asked the roommate to grab coffee. So when finally this guy will say, okay, hey, let's hang out. Let's go to the gym. Bryan rejects him. It's like, are you serious? And then he turns around and asks the guy later on, does he want to grab coffee? I'm like, this time he had a commitment. So Kohberger continued striking up conversations each time they passed each other. Kohberger explained he was from Pennsylvania, like living in Eastern Washington, the neighbor said. Oh, sorry. Kohberger explained he was from Pennsylvania and he liked living in Eastern Washington. That's what he told him. Over time, though, the man started to avoid Kohlberger if he saw him coming, not because he didn't like him, but because their talks tended to drag on. Exactly. To me, that's a clue. That's a big indicator. I know a lot of people would say, oh, that's just small. He just likes to talk and be chatty. No, there are some people who don't have a certain sense of awareness of other people's time schedules and things they have going on. That shows a sense of disregard for other people, because it's like he's chatting on and on and on, and these people have things to do and they don't have time to be chatting for hours and hours and hours. And it seems like Bryan doesn't recognize other people's needs and wants. He just kind of wants to do it he just kind of wants everybody to listen to him without respecting other people's schedules. And that can also show to me some type of lack in an ability to interact with other people properly, like just because he doesn't understand the certain cues, especially in interpersonal relationships. I mean, come on, you're talking to this guy and drag on and on for hours, and this guy has to leave. So now he doesn't even want to be around him. This guy's avoiding Kohlberger if he sees him. That is a red flag, and it seems like a lot of people avoid Bryan. We're hearing from a lot of people who are saying this. He said that when he saw Kohlberger approach, he would quicken his steps to appear in a hurry so it wouldn't look awkward to give Kohlberger a passing hello rather than fall into a conversation. Wow, he would hurry up and run and try to run away from Bryan. Man, if that's not a red flag, I don't know what is. Okay. Why is everybody running from Bryan? It seems like all these people who talk and come out and talk about how they're just avoiding him and don't want to be around him. This person says, I know if I start, he won't stop, he told Insider. See, I know if I start, he won't stop. So it's like Bryan doesn't respect boundaries. It seems like that. For example, with the Tinder date, she talked about how Bryan invites himself in and just starts touching her without her permission. That is a person who doesn't respect boundaries. And then he follows her to the bathroom, which is, again, another intrusive behavior. Now with his interpersonal relationships with people, he likes to talk and talk and talk and not stop and not respect people's boundaries and time schedules and things they have going on. So now you've got individuals who are avoiding him, like this man. Kohlberger's relationship with his downstairs neighbors, a couple with small children, was less friendly. So they're talking about a different neighbor now that had kids. Angela He described him as an insomniac who kept them awake at night by pacing and intermittently running his garbage disposal, sometimes until 4 a.m. She said she considered having words with Kohlberger, but decided not to, in the hopes that he would be equally gracious if her crying children ever kept him awake. And good thing she didn't complain to him, because who knows what he would have tried to do. She may have been his victim, who knows. The University of Idaho campus and the town of Moscow on January 3rd, near the neighborhood where the 4 students were unalived. Here you can see the town here, just overlooking the University of Idaho campus. Outside his apartment complex, Kohlberger didn't stand out to many. See that? Outside of his apartment complex, no one really paid attention to him. So really his interactions with that neighbor, the one that was talking that said he was avoiding him, seems like more of the substantive interaction that he had. In Washington, Cassia Julius, a bartender at the Land, the closest bar and restaurant to his apartment. See, now we're knowing about some bars over there. The bartender at the Land. Okay, we'll have to look at the Land. Told Insider that she'd have to crane her neck back to make eye contact with Kohlberger, who stands 6 feet tall, when she served him. See, this is another bar that Bryan goes to. See, it's a bar. And we know that Bryan likes to frequent bars. For example, in Pennsylvania, he'd go to bars. And now they're talking about this bar called the Land that he goes to. So this is some subsequent circumstantial evidence that he might have also visited the Coog Bar, which was a bar in Pullman, Washington, that Kaylee celebrated her 21st birthday, which can be a clue as to where Bryan may have possibly met Kaylee and developed this obsession, or even any of the Idaho 4. Because Kaylee was attached to the hip to Maddie, I assume that Maddie probably would have accompanied Kaylee to that bar, but there's evidence that she went to the Cougar bar because she wrote her name on a wall at that bar saying that she was there and that she put 21 because she was celebrating her 21st birthday there. And Kaylee's mother has posted a photo of her at that bar for her birthday. So that could be a clue as to the connection or how Bryan first laid eyes on the victims in this tragedy. So this bartender says, but she said she'd remember him simply because of his height and the last name on his credit card. She said he was normal. A server at the brewery in Pullman also remembered Kohberger stopping in, but nothing stood out as particularly odd. So again, a brewery. So this guy, Bryan, drinks a lot. That's what I can get from this. He's at bartender. He's at a bar, the Land. He's at a brewery. He also had horrible incidents in Pennsylvania at a bar. So it just seems like Bryan frequents a lot of bars, which in my opinion really can clue us in what connection and how he encountered these victims, because we also know the victims go to bars. In fact, the very last night of their life, Maddie and Kaylee were at a bar. And we know that Kaylee goes to bars in Washington, in Pullman, Washington. Based upon the information, you'll have to watch my prior video about that. But she goes to bars in Pullman, Washington, called the Coug. One bar she goes to a lot, but a lot of college students go to, called the Coug. And that bar is pretty much near and associated, I would say, with the university because they are the Cougars. So a lot of college students go there a lot. And in particular, Kaylee and other people from Idaho go to that bar to celebrate, for example, their 21st birthday. It's very well known. So that is really where I think they met each other. That's my opinion. A server at the brewery in Pullman also remembered her, but she said nothing stood out about him. Many who knew him more closely, though, have now taken steps to disassociate from the heinous crimes for which he is accused. A Winston Short Hall, where Kohberger studied on campus, his photo hung in a first floor frame display on criminology students. By Friday, January 6th, a blank space in the montage with ripped paper inside indicated that his photo had been torn out. Oh my gosh, guys, by just January 6th, they tore Bryan's picture outside, out of the frame. Wow, that was displayed of the criminology students. They did not waste any time, y'all. They ripped his picture out. Oh my gosh, you can truly see how this school perceived Bryan. Not in a positive light for sure. Several professors of criminology just declined to speak with Insider. A criminology student named Emily, though, who asked to be identified by her first name only, had Kohberger as a teacher's assistant. She said he had been gruff and difficult to deal with early in the semester. And notice, early in the semester, this was before he allegedly unalived the 4 Idaho students. So before he did that, he was more, he overly graded and was too strict in his grading based upon some of the students that he was a teacher assistant for. And a lot of people complained about that. So that's how she's saying earlier in the semester. That was before the Idaho killings. It seemed like after the Idaho killings, he became preoccupied and stressed about that. And let's see what happened after that. She said after the killings, though, she said he seemed to lose interest in teaching, assigning his students to write essays, and handing back uniform grades. She said afterward, he didn't grade at all. She said he was not a great TA. Wow. So it seemed like even that's really sad when the students who he taught, they have a negative perspective of him, and just seeing the stark difference in his behavior. Before the Idaho killings, he was very strict. He had very unrealistic expectations. There was some students that said that he would write excessive notes on their papers when he was grading. But after the killings, all of a sudden, he's just handing back, papers with no notes on it. They're just uniform high grades. They're all getting uniform high grades now. He's not even really paying any interest to them. And her perception of him is that he was not a great TA. And that's something a lot of students agree with him about. Nothing suspicious ever. In the days and weeks after the killings, fear tore through the college towns of the University of Idaho, and Washington State University. Nervous students awaited any news. Some left the communities altogether. Now, guys, check this out. In fact, Kohberger was one of only a few students, guys. That's what a red flag here. He was one of the only few students who kept appointments at a Pullman medical office after the crimes, a receptionist there told Insider. That should have been a red flag, because everybody else is running scared, but he's so calm, he don't care. He's resuming life like nothing ever happened when all the other students are running panic. You could just see his behavior and see this guy clearly knew what was up, because he was the one that did the killings, in my opinion. And again, a disclaimer, all individuals, Bryan in particular, is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. 4 days after the killings, though, Bryan arrived at his appointment, you guys. 4 days after the killings, he arrives at a medical appointment. That's why I feel like that appointment is imperative. I want to know what, if anything, that doctor or nurse observed on his arms, on his neck, any injuries that they've seen. I wonder what kind of appointment this was, because that would be imperative information. Okay. But again, I know that is protected information under HIPAA, but because he's being investigated for a criminal charge, a very heinous crime, I'm pretty sure they will be able to subpoena and get some information about this and see if this man had some injuries. I'm just saying. The receptionist at the office, who declined to give her name because discussing the interaction might violate medical privacy laws. You notice that it will violate medical privacy laws. Said Kohberger acted so friendly that it prompted her boss to comment. It seems like he was overcompensating, guys. She said he was so nice and charming. She never says that about anybody, the receptionist told Insider. I was like, yeah, he really was. That sounds like Bryan was trying to be overly nice, trying to overly try to compensate because he had this consciousness of guilt. So he was trying to cover up his behavior by trying to be overly charming, because she said her supervisor never commented on anything like that. But Bryan was so overly nice that her boss said, oh, he's so nice and charming. And the fact that she never says that about anybody, to me, is a huge red flag. It sounds like Bryan was overcompensating. He was trying to appear to be nice and friendly, to try to continue on with his life and try to cover up any disturbing behaviors of him so he wouldn't be noticeable to others. That's what I'm starting to think. He scheduled an ordinary follow-up appointment for spring semester. This part really makes me wonder what if anything, did he have any bruises on him or anything? -2 said Kohberger remained friendly in recent months and never went without his visual warm greeting. Nothing suspicious ever, Dash said. Dash's roommate said he presumed once his schedule cleared that he would grow friendlier with Kohberger. Yet he became busier as the end of fall semester neared. So he began taking steps to cut short his interactions with his seemingly gregarious neighbor. Wow, Bryan couldn't even seem to have a good relationship with his neighbors. This guy here is saying, he said that he tried to avoid any interactions with this guy. That is crazy. Very crazy. This experience, being friendly but not friends, is typical in the communities of Pullman and Moscow. Tyler, a 21-year-old native to Moscow, said residents in both communities were familiar with many but friends with few. I'm just going to say his first name because I can't say this guy's last name. Tyler said he was particularly touched by the killings because Chapin was a regular at his parents' vape and pipe store. in Pullman. Interesting. So he would come to the vape and pipe store. Still, while recognizing faces is easy, making friends isn't, he said. If you really want to know this town, it's a lonely town, Tyler told Insider. It takes a lot of effort to meet people here. I mean, Brian, even before he got here, he had weird experiences. So I thought it was quite interesting, guys, that he had these medical appointments and how he was just especially charming. It was like, was he trying to overcompensate? Look how soulless this guy looks. He looks like a straight demon. I feel you. I tell you guys, I feel Brian is demon possessed based upon some of the statements he said in that Tappa Talk. And again, you'll have to watch that video that we went over those statements. This man says that the demons are laughing at him. He hears demons in his head. He hears screaming voices. He looks possessed. And he sees humans as just a sack of meat, and he feels no emotions. So if that's really his blog, allegedly, he is a very disturbing individual. But I thought it was quite interesting, guys, that he went to these medical appointments. I feel that that's very telling in terms of whether he had any injuries on him. I wonder if the doctors noticed anything. I know there's medical privacy laws, but given that he's being investigated for a crime, I'm pretty sure the prosecutors will try to file a limited request to see if they could, get a statement or something, because you guys, the fact that he went to these doctor appointments are very interesting and important to find out if they noticed any injuries on him. Because they have to take your blood pressure and other standard procedures when you go to a doctor. So I'm pretty sure he would have had, even if he came with long sleeves on, he would have had to put his sleeves up so that they could see his arms or whatever to take his blood pressure. So I found this article, guys, to be very interesting. You guys let me know what you think about all this information that we're hearing from all these different people, and just how we can put this together to formulate what this type of guy is. What are we dealing with this guy? Okay, he seems very socially awkward. He seems like a very antisocial type person, and like I said before, he does give me that vibe of being an incel. Doesn't seem to really be able to have a relationship. And an antisocial person, what I will say about that, this sick guy here, in my opinion, an antisocial personality disorder, which is called sometimes sociopathy, is a mental disorder in which a person consistently shows no regard for right and wrong. Sounds like Brian. Shows no regard for right and wrong. Number one, he doesn't respect people's boundaries. We've seen that with the Tinder Date. How he just welcomes himself in her house, touching on her when she doesn't want to be touched, just saying a lot of inappropriate things, asking girls at bars who they're with and where they live, and calling women bees when they reject him. Just weird, awkward ways he behaves. So shows no regard for right and wrong, ignores the rights and feelings of others. That sounds consistent with the neighbor who says when Brian talks to him, Brian will talk for hours and hours and hours. And this neighbor has to get to appointments, and he literally has to start avoiding Brian because Brian doesn't regard or have respect for this neighbor's schedule. And, when you're a college student, you don't have a lot of time to sit and talk for hours. You got to get to your next appointment. You got to study, especially when you're a graduate student. There's extensive amounts of study and just you have a very busy schedule. And so he ignores the rights and feelings of others because he'll just keep chatting on and on and on without respecting people. People with antisocial personality disorder tend to antagonize, manipulate, or treat others harshly and with callous indifference. Well, we've heard that from allegedly his blog. On the Tappa Talk blog, Brian talked about how he was mean to his family, how he was mean to his father, and he felt bad for being mean to his father, and how when he would hug his parents or his family, he would see nothing, he would feel nothing. So that shows a harshly callous indifference for others. Also, the fact that he perceives humans as a sack of meat definitely shows a complete indifference for human life and for human value. They show no guilt or remorse for their behavior. Well, in Brian's Tappa Talk blog, he says that he feels no emotion. He doesn't care about anyone at all. He doesn't feel at all. That's what he said in his Tappa Talk, allegedly. And again, you have to watch that video that I break down each one of his statements. Individuals with antisocial personality disorder often violate the law, becoming criminals. They may lie, and we've had examples. We just talked about the various examples of Bryan lying. For example, when he lied to the young lady who he went on the Tinder date with, he kept touching her, and she, told him she didn't like the fact that he was touching her. And then when she told him that, he denies it. He denies it. When she tells him, he's like, oh, I didn't touch you, when that's a lie. She said that he had touched her. She didn't like his touching. And he was basically gaslighting her. Similarly, with the bartender or the bar owner in Pennsylvania who tried to confront Bryan about the many awkward, creepy experiences that he had with the different women at his bar, Bryan again denied and tried to act as if he didn't know what was going on. So that's consistent with an antisocial personality of just someone who continually lies about things, tries to gaslight people. And that's what he, based upon what people were saying, he allegedly did. They also say that antisocial personalities can behave violently and or impulsively. They behave violently or impulsively. And the violent part comes in with allegedly what he did to the Idaho 4, if he is convicted of this. And have problems with drugs and alcohol use. Well, we know that Bryan now allegedly frequents a lot of bars. We've already heard from this Inside article that Bryan was seen at breweries, at another bar called The Land. Also, he would frequent a bar in Pennsylvania. So it appears as though he drinks a lot of alcohol. Also, he appears to be an addict in terms of a lot of heroin. We've heard from multiple people who know him say he was in and out of rehab and that he had used heroin a lot, and he would ask for rides or he would drive to go see his drug dealer. So he has problems with drug and alcohol use. So he's lining up with this antisocial personality disorder. Also, because of these characteristics, people with this disorder typically can't fulfill responsibilities related to family, work, or school. Well, Pete has mentioned that he has a lot of problems in his family on the Tappa Talk blog, that he didn't really seem to care too much about his family and was disregarding his father or being very mean to his father. He admitted that on his blog, if that is him. So to me, it appears as though his behavior, guys, is consistent with him having an antisocial personality or antisocial mental disorder. Now, this guy seems like he has a whole assortment of things going on with him. Like I said, I think allegedly he's an incel. I think allegedly he's a very antisocial person. I think allegedly he might have some psychopath tendencies and narcissistic tendencies. But those are just opinions. All I have is a bachelor's degree in psychology. I'm not a doctor in psychology. I'm a doctor in law. So he's going to have to undergo therapy and assessment. They will be doing an assessment. I'm pretty sure his attorney, which they do under standard when people are charged with these type of crimes, the defense attorney will have their client undergo a mental health analysis. So I am interested in finding out what they determined, because also in Bryan's youth, he took a lot of different medications. He was on all kinds of drugs. And again, you'll have to watch my Tappa Talk and have the details of that. But let me know what you guys think about this new information, and have a good night. And remember to litigate your case with dignity and grace. And in the comments, the only thing I ask is be kind. And please do not refer to any other YouTube channels in the comments. If you do, I will have no choice but to delete your comment, and I don't want to do that. Just respect the channel. Don't cite other people's YouTube channels. If you keep doing that, I'll have to block you. So just please don't. Just be polite and kind, and I would love to hear your opinion. Have a wonderful night. Take care.